Right, back live with you tonight here on In Focus. So thanks for staying on. While the City Power's prepaid customers in Johannesburg are still reeling from the new electricity surcharge, some of them were erroneously charged business tariffs for their prepaid electricity. The power utility says this might have been caused by the fact that some customers registered their accounts using business or trust names. Nqobani Mzizi is the Senior Manager, Revenue Enhancement at the City Power. Joins us in studio for that conversation. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on.
Good evening, Tawa, and thank you for having us.
It seems in a rush for you to put the surcharge. You have now also robbed people of their kilowatts. What's going on?
Well, it's not that we robbed them, as you say in your introduction. By virtue of them having their accounts written out in business names, we made the assumption that they are businesses. But in them then coming forward to tell us that, no, look, I've registered the account in my business name because, yes, it's owned by my business, but it's a residential property. We have then gone on to make the corrections with the evidence, of course, that they've provided to us to prove to us that it's not a commercial or an industrial property, but it's rather a residential property.
Yeah. But why did it happen particularly now when you were switching into this surcharge?
It's because the business tariff and the domestic tariff now attract these service charges. So we applied the business service charge to a residential property, and that is why it became so evident now, because he said, wait a minute, I'm buying for 1,000 Rand, which I would ordinarily buy for. I'm aware of the 200 surcharge, but now I am charged more than the 200 surcharge. In fact, with the 1,000 Rand, I'm not even covering the surcharge, so there are no units that are coming through because the business surcharge is way much more than the 200 residential surcharge.
How do you come to those figures? I mean, there are some who are pushing back, and I'm sure you guys are ready and bracing yourself for a big fight. That outer, who won the e-tolls, by the way, so brace yourself, are coming to push back on this. How do you come up with that figure of 270 Rands or 2,700 or so a year?
So it's 230 Rands a month. So yes, of course, I think in totaling it up, it could come around to that amount which you said. So basically we say, as a user of our service, each user must contribute towards the maintenance of the infrastructure and pay their equitable share to the services that they would receive. And when I speak of the services, I speak of the fixed cost being the maintenance of the premises that we as the technocrats sit in, as well as any other fixed fee which has got nothing to do with the infrastructure, because this 200 Rand is split into two. 70 Rand is for service charges, the 130 is for the network. So when we sat down and came up with how much each person should contribute, every other tariff category already contributes towards that. So businesses do, other conventional residential customers already contribute there, because not all of the residential customers are on prepaid. Some are on conventional use. In other words, they pay after consumption. So they already are contributing. And when I say businesses, both industrial and commercial businesses. So they are already contributing. It's just that prepaid customers, historically, since time immemorial, when we introduced this tariff, were not contributing. So we say now it's time for you to contribute your part to this.
Yeah. But part of what the pushback is that the reason why they opted out of the postpaid system was because they wanted certainty. I didn't want any hidden costs. You sold me this thing, say, if I pay a particular amount of money to buy the meter, I pay that once off, there will be no hidden costs. What I pay is what I get.
Correct.
Now, all of a sudden, you are coming up with some backdoor situation of wanting me to pay an amount which, by the way, is not going to be fixed, because the more you go on with years, inflation or not, it's more than likely that amount is going to go up.
Most certainly, the amount will not be the same. Just as with all the other service charges for the other tariff categories, they've gone up with annual tariff increases as given to us by NERSA. It is also going to go up. So your question then around the certainty. Well, look, historically, prepaid was marked for the lower end of our customers, right? Those who are economically challenged. So it was historically for those low-income areas, if I can put it like that, right? So over time, there started being a migration of the middle income and the affluent areas, as how we call it, the affluent and non-affluent areas. The affluent areas started migrating them. And with the model, the tariff modeling, how we have put this together is that the affluent areas, as well as customers who can contribute to this, must contribute to this. But now with the high migration towards that tariff, we realize that, wait a minute, our ability to service the network through the capacity or network charge, as well as the fixed fee that I speak about, the surcharge. We are now, not the surcharge, the service charge, we are now not collecting it, and it's as a result of this. So there was a loophole which over time was not necessarily abused, which we allowed because we had left this tariff like that for years. And when we tried to introduce the service and network charge in 2016, there was a slight pushback. So there's been pushbacks for years. So this is something which eventually is now happening after 8 years or so being discussed and being considered by council. So now they said, no, you may now go ahead. And it's not something that we just put in. There was deliberations, as you'd understand, the process of approval within municipalities.
So what is the benefit then of being in a prepaid? If whether I'm on prepaid or not, I still pay this.
Well, the benefit of being on prepaid is that you can manage how much you use. You'll not use more than what you buy. So when you see that my units are running out and I don't have money, what would you ordinarily do? You would switch off your geyser because you know that my units there are decreasing. Right, so you are in absolute control of what you are using. The benefit was not intended for you to not pay the service fee. The benefit was intended for you to manage how much you pay, because what we see is that people who are on conventional or on metered supplies, they use, and come month end, a person gets a shock to say, oh my goodness, I've used 3,000 and in my budget I had put aside 1,005. That is because they only see the consumption after the fact. So the benefit of prepaid is that you can manage that even before you get a shock, because you can see everything on your customer interface unit, which we call a CIU. Then you manage your consumption or your usage, as it were.
Yeah. You don't foresee this having the adverse effect. You're trying to collect more, right? But essentially what it's going to do is going to encourage people to connect illegally because they just can't afford this thing.
Already they are collecting illegally.
Exactly, but it's just going to exacerbate the matter and make it worse.
It is an inevitable concomitant of the type of business we are in. In other words, illegal bypassing, tampering, and all the things that we face as an entity, with this or without this, are already challenges that we are facing, right? So indeed, yes, it will do that, and it's one of the risks that we considered. But it's unfortunately one of the things where we had a discussion and said, which is the better evil? Do we not put it in and continue wallowing down in our inability to meet our needs because there's a grouping of people who are not contributing and there's also a grouping that is not paying? Or do we bring everyone to the same level, everyone contributes their equitable share, and then we then deal with the consequences there too? The latter solution, the latter idea was the one that we resolved on. So indeed, yes, that may happen. One cannot deny that, as it's already happening, but we have plans in place that are going to work to address that. So Revenue Protection Department, we've got increased security, additional surveillance, additional patrolling, etc. So we're really going to try, and over and above that, monitoring of our systems to see, because we've got online systems, we'll see if there's an increase in bypass. This person is not buying. We monitor your buying patterns. So we have put some mitigations in place.
So one of the issues that also would be raised is the fact that this particular amount is not regulated anyway. It's your own decision at a particular time in City Power. This is what we're going to charge, as opposed to the tariff. So what you are unable to get via the tariff, because NERSA is going to say, no, cannot try and recoup your profits here because of your own issues. You're going to try and recoup via this particular service charge.
So that's not entirely true. What NERSA does when we submit an application, as with all municipalities, and they are the regulator, of course, of the industry, they say to us, submit to us the cost of supplying the service. So we do a cost of supply study. And as you would know right now, over the past week, the South African Local Government Association, SALGA, has been fighting for other Munics who did not get the approval and as such are still running on last year's tariffs, albeit Eskom charging them new rates. They expect you to provide a cost of supply study before they can approve the tariff. So the service fee is included in the cost of supply. Maybe just to give a small context, NERSA says, how much does it cost you to run City Power? We sit down and say, what are our cost drivers? Our cost elements, it's the cost of the service that we are in the business of, the electricity, maintenance costs, labor costs, etc., etc., etc. Then we say this is all our costs, and these are our customers, and in order to be able to service this and to provide the service, this is how much we believe from our customer base. We apply these tariffs, we'll be able to recoup and cover our costs. NERSA is not in the business of having us make a profit. So in collecting this money, remember, not the service fee, but the unit or consumption fee just goes straight to Eskom, right? So maybe there'll be a 5% that remains with us, but the rest goes to Eskom. So that 5% is not enough to maintain the network, neither is it enough to pay the service costs. And I'm just saying 5%, but in most cases for prepaid, it's subsidized by the other tariffs. So we end up not even making any money on prepaid by virtue of cross-subsidization, and that's an acceptable norm in the industry that we are in. So we need this so that we are able to service as well as to service, pay to our services and maintain our network. So for all the customers who are there were not contributing to that. So unfortunately, well for them, and we are not insensitive to the fact that from 0 to 200, which you were not previously paying, it's a huge jump in this current economic climate. I take nothing away from that, but everyone must contribute their own fair share so that we are able to provide the service that we need to provide. Yeah.
So you've got a category of clients here. One, you've already mentioned the business clients. There's those who are registered in business, but it's a residential property. There are those who are off-grid, and there are those who are indigent as well. How does it affect them?
Right. So on the prepaid tariff, and I'm happy you've asked that question, we have catered for the indigent customers. So how did we do that? We said there's going to be two categories of prepaid. Prepaid low, which caters for the indigent, and the indigent customers, we do not charge them that service fee, okay? And how do you qualify to be indigent before I go to the prepaid high? You must be earning less than 6,000 rands, right, in that household, or you are a pensioner, okay? So those do not pay that service fee. And how do you qualify? You go to your nearest City of Johannesburg walk-in center, you make an application, and then they process the application, they do their own checks and so forth. Then they say, indeed, you do qualify, and we do it every 6 months. And the reason for the 6 months is because by attrition, people could pass on, right, natural attrition, or on the other end, your economic circumstances could change for the better, and you earn more than 6,000, so you need not benefit. So we do cater for those ones. While on the other end, those who are not indigent but have stayed on prepaid, they're the ones who are contributing. That's the one category. The next one, of course, being domestic conventional, those who pay after use. Then the businesses, there are two. They are commercial, which we categorize as a business tariff, and then we have industrial, those who use excessive power. Those are large power users, as we call them in our terminology. So we have those three categories, and agricultural, of course. And it's quite interesting that the Minister of Agriculture was in conversation with you. We do have a tariff called an agricultural tariff that caters for those who are in the agricultural sector.
Yeah, and those who have opted to be off-grid, you still...
Well, if you've opted to be off-grid, Thabo, what we have observed is that those who are off-grid keep us as a backup. And that is one of the challenges that we had. So they would migrate to prepaid, where there's no fixed fee, and they have their own solar systems and everything that needs them to be off-grid, or that permits them to be off-grid. And in them being then off-grid, what then do? They use us as a backup, and they pay nothing towards the maintenance of the infrastructure that they fall back on, should there be no sun or should their system fall, or when they decide that, you know what, I want to maintain my system, I go there. So if they still have us as a backup, they are going to pay the service fee. So they're definitely not indigent, because you won't be indigent and have a solar system, right? So if they're not indigent, they'll be paying that if they're still on prepaid. So they're absolutely not completely off the grid. And generally, some of them overproduce. So once they overproduce, they want to feed back into our system, because we do have that allowance where you can sell back to us. So if you are that type of customer, definitely you will still contribute to the service fee. So they're not lost absolutely to contributing to these fees.
Nqobani Mzizi, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. That is Nqobani Mzizi, Senior Manager, Revenue Enhancement at City Power.